Good morning to everyone and good afternoon in Europe, of course. The fact sheet that we are presenting today focuses on the implementation of the EUDR in Argentina. And our idea for this presentation is to share our concerns after having investigated the technicalities of the implementation procedure and the intervening actors, after having identified some potential problems. So as a presentation of the Gran Chaco, this is the second largest forest of South America after the Amazon rainforest. It covers 108 million hectares, and it is located in several countries. Argentina has 60% of this forest. Next comes Paraguay with 23%, Bolivia with 11%, and a small fraction in Brazil. As you can see in the legend to the map, forest loss and agricultural expansion has been rampant in the Chaco since 1985. Now focusing in the Argentine Chaco, where 4 million hectares were cleared since the enactment of the National Forest Law in 2007. This law defined the minimum standards for environmental protection of native forests. And of course, this deforestation process has been driven by agricultural expansion. Now, zooming into the benchmarking period, which you can see in the graph, that is the time frame used for country risk assessment by the European Commission. Between 2015 and 2020, 884,000 hectares of native forests were cleared in the Argentine Chaco. In this same period, the region experienced an equivalent increase in cultivated pastures and agricultural crops. What you see in the graph is that every year of this benchmarking period, both the hectares of forest lost per year and the annual deforestation rate were above the threshold established by the European Commission to classify countries. This is an ongoing process, and after 2020, additional 855 hectares of forest were cleared, and agricultural expansion continued to increase. Now going into the implementation in Argentina, you probably already know that the conditions for products entering the European Union are that they must be deforestation-free, they must have been produced in accordance with the legislation of the country of production, and they must be covered by a due diligence statement. We have identified some issues in the implementation scheme being developed in Argentina, which we have organized under these three pillars of the EUDR: due diligence, benchmarking, and legality. Regarding due diligence, it is enhanced in Argentina of a private organization called VISEC, led by powerful associations of the seed processing and exporting industry, and partnered with the main actors of the soybean and beef agribusiness. And very importantly, this organization is legitimized by the Argentinian government and also by the European Union. Regarding the benchmarking process, you probably know that on May 22nd, the European Commission published its first list of country risk classification, and Argentina was assigned a standard risk of deforestation. A few months ago, the Argentine government presented to the European Commission a report that supports the idea that Argentina presents a low risk of deforestation associated with the production of soybean and beef, and that it should be classified accordingly. A few months ago, the Argentine government presented to the European Commission a plead for reconsideration of this classification, asking to be assigned a low-risk category at the country level. In the third place, regarding legality, it is worth noting that peasant and indigenous people who inhabit the Chaco and land tenure conflicts and systematic human rights violation are being excluded from this accordance to the legislation requirement, or at least partially excluded. All what I have described in a political context where the current national government is advancing towards an extractivist agenda, actively dismantling existing mechanisms for environmental and human rights protection, and rejecting the international environmental policy consensus in which the EUDR is rooted. An example of this is the rejection of the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Some important numbers you should know about soybean and beef production and trade in Argentina. The trade relationship between Argentina and the European Union regarding soybean and beef is significant for both parties. And as you can see in the pie charts, in 2024, the Argentinian soybean and beef exports represented 12 and 22% of the European Union's total soybean and beef imports. Now, the majority of Argentina's exports originate from extra Chaco regions, as you can see in the bars next to the pie charts. Mainly the Pampas, a region with no deforestation risk, where 84% of the soybean cultivation and 80% of the cattle stock are concentrated. These products can be considered deforestation-free because the area was dominated by grassland when agriculture was introduced into the region in the 20th century. As such, strict implementation of the EUDR would likely not disrupt the European Union supply chains to any significant extent. However, the remaining 16% of the soybean and 20% of the cattle stocks are located in the Chaco region, which, as already mentioned, is a global deforestation hotspot and should be considered a high-risk region. Excuse me. In summary, strict implementation of the EUDR would not only not disrupt the European Union supply chain, but could have a meaningful impact in protecting the Argentinian Chaco region and its people. So to round off some take-home messages, I hope it is clear from our presentation that assigning a single risk category to Argentina will underestimate the risk of the Chaco region and overestimate the risk of the main agricultural non-forest region of the Pampas. Also, under the current scenario, the implementation of the EUDR could mask the infringement of human rights of people that inhabit native forests of the Chaco region and exclude mechanisms of participation and control of key stakeholders. A few things that we have thought that could help in this sense is to have access to information and online land units classified as deforestation-free within the due diligence process, to create evidence-based databases on land conflicts, also an effective whistleblowing mechanisms to report illegal practices or violations of the EUDR requirements, such as tampering with traceability system. And lastly, to operationalize channels to raise conflicts concerning human rights violations or other infringements legal protection that are directly relevant to the EUDR compliance. So this is what we have prepared for today. I hope it's useful for you. And of course, we are open to any questions, comments, and discussion. Thank you very much.